is how deeply your research is rooted in the sources. And you refer to the sources constantly, and that is very, very promising. And you also had a very clear structure. You wanted to show how soldiers' emotions changed from hope, became disappointment, and then gradually became worse than disappointment. Would you say anger, or how would you describe the emotional state of the workers over time, soldiers over time?
In my opinion, I think it wasn't anger until things started being added on. I feel like the anger was once there was a central voice, once there was actually somebody speaking for New Revolution or New Leadership, that is when the emotion truly switched to anger, because they knew there was somebody there that could take those steps, could make those changes.
Mm-hmm. So you don't think it's a Kerensky offensive, the experience? You're saying it's Bolshevik propaganda?
Yeah, I honestly feel it's more propaganda.
Interesting.
That's the direction I'm leaning more towards.
Interesting. That's a provocative finding. Yeah, it's. You see, I'm just wondering, most of your paper is before the July crisis, before. I'm just wondering if you can stop there, because what you are showing us so clearly and so nicely is the nuances of sentiments. It doesn't become anger immediately, but you show us this gradually shifting away from hope and joy to something else, disappointment, right? Which I thought was very valuable, how you demonstrate this. So perhaps you don't even have to go to July. Yes, in July you get the end result of this conflict, of this degeneration of sentiments. But, well, I leave it up to you. I thought your richest materials were from March, April, and May.
My intentions with today was to just try and do the beginning parts of my paper. My goal is to go into July and go into the fall. I want to get to the point where the soldiers do get angry.
Okay.
The big thing with me when doing research like this is I love the emotion that comes from so much history. I get emotional when I'm studying history. So seeing the emotions of people or researching or reading about people's emotions, it adds so much more to what I'm doing.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's in other words, you're saying these voices come alive for you. It's not just lines in the text. You actually hear these voices and these soldiers, and you're deeply thinking about their lives.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
That's great. That's a great quality. So maybe you're a born historian. I mean, you need empathy for this kind of history. That's great. So thanks for sharing that. I thought, you do exactly what I was hoping you would do in this class. You actually confront the primary source evidence and dig into the materials. That's what you have done very well. So I look forward to your paper. So thank you. So if I'm not mistaken, Robert, you're the last speaker today. Last but not least. So if you're ready, go ahead.
I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that, Professor?
Yes.
Okay.
Comrade Robert, I like that.
Yeah, it gets better, don't worry. Hi, this is a presentation brought to you by Conrad Roberts. So today I'm going to be talking about Petrograd and the workers. Why can't I go forward? But more specifically, what's the point of my presentation? What questions do I want to answer? I want to build a narrative, or rather present to you a series of events which will show us the conditions which led to the October Revolution, through the eyes of the Petrograd workers. So let's go through sort of a chronology of events, right? So starting in Petrograd, let's start here and kind of work off of, okay, so why is the city of Petrograd significant? At the time of in February of 1917, it was the capital of Russia. It had a population of 2.4 million, making it by far the largest city in Russia at the time. I should mention that the capital of Russia is the seat of government. I should mention that Petrograd, that it's the seat of government, and so Tsar Nicholas II lives in Petrograd as well, right? In the Alexander Palace. So with the outbreak of war in 1914, Petrograd becomes the major center of armaments production in Russia, meeting 2/3 of the nation's defense requirements. So during basically the war, Petrograd's industrial workforce grew by 60%, right, reaching 392,800 workers by the time we're in 1917 in February. It was actually more like 417,000 if we include the factories in the suburbs, right? So when we get to the February Revolution in Petrograd on February 23rd, which would be March 8th on the Western calendar, the revolution comes about quite spontaneously and unexpectedly, right? So the next day, and the revolution starts on February 23rd, but by February 24th, 200,000 workers were on strike in Petrograd. Within 2 days, by February 25th, thousands of demonstrators are clashing with troops, and the revolution is commenced. On February 27th, now just 4 days, something truly miraculous happens, something climactic. Entire regiments of soldiers from the Petrograd garrison desert the army and join the February Revolution on the side of the workers. The same day, the Duma, aka the Russian parliament, refuses to obey an order from the Russian emperor. And with albeit the reluctant support of the generals of the army, the Duma declares itself a provisional committee. And after March 3rd, when the emperor steps down, it will declare itself to be the provisional government of Russia. So why specifically is the date February 23rd, which would be March 8th in the Western calendar? Why was that date significant? Why is March 8th a significant date? It's International Women's Day. So during the February Revolution, we see thousands of housewives and female workers surging into the streets. And so I'd actually like to hear some firsthand accounts from some of the Petrograd workers themselves. Okay, so let me read you a firsthand account from the February Revolution from an engineering worker in the Vyborg district. We could hear women's voices in the lane overlooked by the windows of our department. Down with the high prices, down with hunger, bread for the workers. I and several comrades rushed at once to the windows. The gates of the mill were flung open. Masses of women workers in a militant frame of mind filled the lane. Those who caught sight of us began to wave their arms, shouting, "Come out! Stop working!" Snowballs flew through the windows. We decided to join the demonstration. So on March 3rd, the Russian Emperor Nicholas II abdicated just 12 days after the start of the February Revolution on February 23rd. And Russia was free. And I want to read you, so John Reed is one of my primary sources, right? So I know you talked about him a lot in class, Professor. And so to give a little bit of history on who John Reed is, he was an American journalist who went over and was sympathetic to the Bolshevik cause. He was a self-described Bolshevik, and he was actually during the time of the October Revolution. He was there fighting alongside Lenin and the Bolsheviks to help overthrow the Kerensky government. And he wrote this book, 10 Days That Shook the World, because he's there during 1917. So obviously you can kind of see his biases. So let me read you this quote from John Reed's book. But the honeymoon was short. The propertied classes wanted merely a political revolution which would take the power from the Tsar and give it to them. They wanted Russia to be a constitutional republic like France or the United States, a constitutional monarchy like England. On the other hand, the masses of the people wanted real industrial and agrarian democracy. So you can see that he sees the provisional government basically just as another form of despotic rule. And he certainly is no fan of Western democracy or capitalism. Okay, so then my next primary source is William English Walling, and he's also an American journalist, and so to give a little context on him, he's also basically a self-described Bolshevik. Back in the United States, he's a labor reformer, right? So he's very, very sympathetic to the Bolshevik cause, right? So I'm going to read you a quote from William English Walling's book, Russia's Message. This is what Williams has to say on the revolution. An account of the revolution of 1905 describes very well the state of mind of the Russian workers, who were later to support Bolshevism almost unanimously. They, the working people, saw it was possible that even under a free government, if it fell into the hands of other social classes, they might still continue to starve. The Russian workman is revolutionary, but he is neither violent, nor dogmatic, nor unintelligent. He is ready for barricades, but he has studied them, and alone of the workers of the world, he has learned about them from actual experience. He is ready and willing to fight this oppressor, the capitalist class, to a finish, but he does not ignore the existence of classes. He merely asks that the other classes take one side or the other in the bitter conflict that draws near. They, the workers, were all agreed that our American institutions were preferable to their own, but they were not very anxious to exchange one desperate for another, the capitalist class. Okay, so basically you could see that William has basically the same opinion as John Reed, right? He thinks that basically to replace the Tsar with sort of Western democracy is basically just and capitalism is basically just another form of dictatorship. Okay, but why were the 1917 Petrograd strikes different than the 1905 Petrograd strikes? Why had one failed and the other succeeded? In 1905, the Tsar had withstood the revolutionary movement for nearly 12 months before finally moving in to crush it. And yet, in 1917, the Tsar had abdicated in response to the Petrograd strikes in less than 12 days. But why? Why was 1905 different from 1917? During the 1905 Petrograd strikes, the army had remained loyal to the Tsar, whereas in 1917, after 3 years of bloody and senseless war, the soldiers threw in their lot with the insurgents on the streets. After the February Revolution, the Petrograd workers, as a separate entity from the provisional government, formed their own executive committees to democratically run the factories. But what did these committees actually accomplish? The first act of the committees was unilaterally to introduce an 8-hour workday, to abolish overtime work, and increase wages by 30 to 50%. And what was the difference between the Petrograd Soviet and the provisional government? Well, the Petrograd Soviet of Workers and Soldiers Deputies was a city council of Petrograd made up of a representative body of the city's workers and soldiers. Although this was a problem, as the city of Petrograd already had a well-established city council, the Duma, aka the provisional government. While the provisional government was the officially recognized government of Russia, the workers of the Petrograd Soviet tried to extend its jurisdiction and the power nationwide as a rival power to the provisional government. And as 1917 progressed, the Petrograd Soviet began to increasingly align themselves with the Bolsheviks. This alignment came from a number of different factors. Through 1917, the state of the Russian economy was only worsening. The improvements of the working conditions and the progressive social reforms that the Petrograd Soviet hoped for were not culminating fast enough. The provisional government had continued the unpopular war. And to make matters worse, during the July days, General Alexander Kerensky, the Minister of War for the provisional government, had orchestrated a failed offensive against the Germans. The attack was led by General Alexei Brusilov. And the offensive itself was a total catastrophe. The total casualty rates of the dead and wounded numbered over 400,000. Leon Trotsky's commentary on Kerensky at this time was, his strength in the period of dual power lay in his combining the weakness of liberalism with the weakness of democracy. General Kornilov's attempt to take over on August 27th the provisional government only made matters worse. So the Kornilov rebellion. The Kornilov Rebellion. Army officers, industrialists, and middle-class liberals had now come to despise Kerensky for being weak, irresolute, and soft on the left. After the failure of the June offensive, they had begun to coordinate the search for a strong man who would crush anarchy in society, revitalize the army, and restore order to the economy. In August, they had found their man on a white horse in General Kornilov. Recently appointed Supreme Commander-in-Chief by Kerensky, Kornilov made no secret of his desire for a military dictatorship that would crush the Soviets, and plans were laid. The push, launched on August 28th, failed almost as soon as it had begun, owing to poor organization, divisions within the counter-revolutionary ranks, and heroic resistance from railway and telegraph workers, and from heroic resistance from railway and telegraph workers. In Petrograd, the district Soviet and factory committees helped to organize bands of armed workers to patrol the city or dig trenches and erect fortifications on the outskirts. Although Kornilov's forces never got within striking distance of the capital, the specter of counter-revolution frightened ordinary working people, who blamed Kerensky for allowing things to come to such a pass. Many were convinced that the extreme situation required an extreme solution. After the Kornilov rebellion, support for the Bolsheviks grew in leaps and bounds. Thus, by the time of the October Revolution, on October 23rd, thousands of workers from the Petrograd Soviet supported Lenin and the Bolsheviks in the overthrow of the Kerensky government. The end.
Well, your talk was like Jared's. It was just had fascinating pictures, fascinating images. And by the way, your presentation was fantastic. You're a great speaker, and a good thing we could see you. You speak with passion and with eloquence, so that's a great gift you have there. But as in Jerry's talk, I'm just wondering what is going to be the core of the paper that you're actually going to write?
Yeah, so Amanda Wixon and I, we met last week to kind of build like an outline, right? And to try to find like a general thesis or argument for my paper. And it originally sort of started with Vladimir Lenin, and I was trying to disprove sort of Lenin's importance, right, to the revolution, and actually say it's actually all these workers, everything, because Lenin at the time is, I think he's in Finland, and he doesn't arrive back until I think April 3rd to deliver his April thesis. So then I said, well, if I'm gonna like make a whole argument of why Lenin's not important and the workers are actually important, why don't I just try to write an essay about the workers, right? Rather than try to shoehorn like Lenin in there. So I'm thinking I want to write an essay that sort of proves how important the workers were to the revolution.
Right, and how one of the themes that you refer to again and again, which is a fascinating theme, the workers are not stupid. They're looking through the facade. I mean, this provisional government is even the Soviet too. They're promising them emancipation and freedom, but they're not delivering. They're not stupid. They're seeing it. And I think what I really liked is how you cite John Reed and Walling, who clearly sees this, right? The double talk, the double speak. Yes, we're a revolutionary government, but we're not really giving what the workers need, right? Isn't that one of the important themes you're trying to get at?
Yeah, so you think that could basically, I mean, that could be a thesis right there, right? I could use that as a thesis for my paper, that the provisional government is not meeting the sort of the needs and the desires of the Petrograd Soviet, right?
Yeah. And John Reed so clearly sees it. So what I would encourage you to do is let a few more workers speak, especially some of you focusing on the radical workers who really are not willing to put up with, the facade, the sort of like going through the motions, the failure to deliver. If you can give more quotations from Hickey or from Voices, and then why not dive more deeply into John Reed? I mean, he has some really fascinating quotes, which understand that he understood why the workers wanted a second revolution, right?
Yeah, I'm working my way through. I'm reading through 10 Days That Shook the World right now. I'm reading the whole thing. So I want to I think you're right. I think I should and I want to incorporate a lot from John Reed into my paper. I think
You see, Comrade Robert, it struck me there is another potential theme, and that is American observers of the Russian Revolution. You have John Reed and you have Walling, right?
I agree with you. I think that would make a great topic for my paper.
How much do they actually understand? And it seems to me they were right on target. They understood that the Bolsheviks didn't just force themselves onto society. They did not organize a coup d'etat, right? Which was the standard assumption of many historians until 20 years ago. The real shift was in the working class, away from the provisional government, away from the Soviet, and the Bolsheviks, perhaps opportunistically, but also astutely understanding working class sentiments, positioned themselves that they were pushed into power, right? So I see a lot of potential there. You just have to make a decision. It's you know yourself. You're packing too much into that presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's it for today. So I'm really pleased how seriously most of you have engaged with primary sources and also have come up with really quite original topics. And I'm happy to read your drafts. I strongly urge you to send me a draft. You don't have to, because that will help you, first of all, understand how I read what you have written. And second of all, of course, an opportunity to strengthen your papers, right? It's not obligatory, but I strongly urge you to do this. You can also, of course, approach Amanda, but I'm there, so even though we won't see each other again. So this brings me then to the conclusion. So I would have preferred to teach this class in person, but I enjoyed it. How seriously most of you took it. I think we had some good discussion, and I think we had some very good presentations. So I'm very pleased, and I hope some of you will keep in touch. If I don't see you, I wish you well. Most of you are graduating, I understand. If anyone is still on campus in the fall, come by. I probably will be on campus. So take good care. I'm going to stay on if anyone wants to talk to me. So, bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor. Will you be hosting office hours tomorrow?
Yes, of course. I'm there for office hours. If you can't make it for office hours, I'm happy to meet with you individually.